Rome fell. You know that part. What they don't tell you is what happened to the money. 70 million people watched 500 years of civilization evaporate in a single generation. Fortunes built over centuries vanished. Savings held in silver coins became worthless. The retirement funds of soldiers who had bled for the frontier for 25 years were erased. And yet some families came out of that collapse wealthier than they entered it. 4 assets protected them, 4 specific things that not only held value through one of history's most catastrophic economic implosions, but transferred enormous wealth to whoever was smart enough to hold them. One of those 4 assets is something every modern financial advisor would call reckless, dangerous, and irresponsible. The Romans who held it didn't just survive the fall, they profited from it. To understand what survived, you first have to understand what killed the Roman economy. Rome didn't die from barbarians alone, it died from its money first. The denarius, Rome's silver coin, was the economic heartbeat of an empire stretching from Scotland to Syria. Under Emperor Augustus, it was nearly 95% pure silver. Every legionnaire's pay, every merchant's profit, and every farmer's life savings was stored in that coin. It wasn't just currency, it was confidence in solid form. Then the bills started arriving. Running a frontier empire against simultaneous pressure from Germanic tribes in the north and the Persians in the east cost money that no tax system on earth could generate fast enough. So the emperors did what governments throughout all of recorded history have done when they can't pay their obligations. They cheated the money. By the reign of Caracalla in the early 3rd century, the silver content of the denarius had fallen to roughly 50%. Coins looked identical and bore the same imperial seal, but half the silver had quietly been replaced with bronze. By the mid-3rd century, the denarius contained less than 5% silver. Scratch the surface and it would flake away, revealing cheap metal underneath. The Roman people noticed. Prices rose. Merchants stopped accepting debased coins. Soldiers demanded raises to compensate for the loss of value. Farmers abandoned their land rather than accept worthless money as payment for grain. Between 235 and 284 AD, Rome suffered military collapse, plague, civil war, and economic implosion simultaneously. Against that backdrop, here is what actually held its value. The first asset was the right kind of gold. Everyone will tell you gold survived Rome's fall, but the version of that story most people hear is dangerously incomplete. When Constantine the Great consolidated power in the early 4th century, he introduced a new coin called the solidus. It was 24-karat gold, struck with consistent purity and precise weight. The solidus wasn't just a coin, it was a declaration of war against the monetary destruction that had been rotting Rome. The market responded immediately. The solidus became the currency of the wealthy and anyone who needed to conduct serious business across boundaries. For the next 7 centuries, it remained the backbone of Mediterranean commerce. A Roman senator who held his wealth in debased denarii was financially destroyed, but the senator who converted his position into gold maintained his standing. However, not all gold was equal. The market was full of clipped coins and fraudulent weights. The men who survived were those who held gold that could be independently verified and trusted in a direct transaction without needing an institutional guarantee. Rome taught us that what cannot be diluted cannot be debased. The second asset is the most counterintuitive: debt. During Rome's hyperinflation, being a debtor was an asset. If a Roman landowner took out a loan of 100,000 denarii in 200 AD, it represented a fortune. By 280 AD, that same 100,000 denarii bought only a few sacks of grain because the currency had collapsed. However, the loan was still denominated in nominal denarii. The borrower repaid the loan in money that was functionally worthless. Inflation systematically transferred wealth from creditors to debtors on a massive empire-wide scale. The borrower kept the land while the debt's purchasing power vanished. Historians document that the great landed families maintained extraordinary power because their debt obligations had been inflated away to near nothing. Inflation is not simply a tax, it is a wealth transfer mechanism. In that transfer, the advantage runs away from those who hold paper claims and towards those who hold real assets, funded by debt in a collapsing currency. The third asset was the self-sufficient estate. Land alone didn't save you, it had to be the right kind of land. Rome at its height was a deeply interconnected economy. When trade networks fractured, a landowner who grew cash crops for export found himself stranded. The estates that survived were built on a different logic, the self-sufficient villa. These were closed-loop economies where grain, meat, timber, wool, and tools were all produced internally. They had their own smiths, carpenters, and physicians. When imperial trade snapped, the self-sufficient villa didn't need it. Furthermore, as the state withdrew, these estates became centers of local political authority. The large villa owner provided security and food, becoming a local sovereign. These social relationships became the template for what eventually evolved into medieval feudalism. These landowners didn't just hold their wealth, they became the structural foundation of the next political order. The fourth asset was the irreplaceable skill. This is the sorting mechanism that every economic collapse applies without mercy. Your credentials do not matter when the institution that validated them ceases to exist. Only two categories of human capability maintain genuine exchange value. The first is the skill that addresses an immediate, unavoidable human need. The physician who can treat infection without imported medicines, the blacksmith who can forge a plow from scrap iron, and the miller who can turn grain into flour. These people could eat because what they produced could not be inflated away or replaced by decree. The second category is the skill that enables commerce across collapsing boundaries. The merchant who could operate across multiple jurisdictions and speak multiple languages remained valuable even as the empire fragmented. While lawyers and imperial administrators struggled when their institutions vanished, the craftsman and the merchant with portable skills carried the practical knowledge of civilization forward. What survives a collapse is not what the system values most in prosperity, it is what cannot be faked, diluted, or made redundant when the system itself is gone. Every modern financial system is more complex than Rome at its height, and every modern currency is more decoupled from tangible value than the most debased denarius. Rome fell slowly, then all at once. History provides the answers for those who know where to look.